A brand new DC Universe movie just delivered one of the most alarming box office results of 2026. Supergirl was supposed to be proof that DC Studios could build momentum after Superman. It had a major comic book character, a young rising star in Millie Alcock, a respected director in Craig Gillespie, and the backing of James Gunn and Peter Safran's newly rebuilt DC Universe. But instead of soaring, Supergirl stumbled out of the gate. The movie reportedly opened with around $38 million in North America and about $68 million worldwide. That would be disappointing for a modest movie, but Supergirl reportedly cost around $170 million to make before marketing costs are even considered. Now, industry reports are suggesting the movie could lose between $100 million and $125 million. That is not just a weak opening. That is the kind of result that makes every studio executive stare at spreadsheets like they are ancient Kryptonian warnings. So what happened? Did audiences reject Supergirl herself? Did DC release the movie at the wrong time? Did superhero fatigue finally catch up with another major franchise? Or is there a deeper issue inside James Gunn's DC universe that people are only beginning to notice? And before we get into the most damaging mistake behind this flop, smash that subscribe button like Lobo smashing through a spacebar fight. Just do it gently enough that your phone does not become a limited edition broken screen collectible. Because the truth behind Supergirl's massive flop is not one simple failure, it is a chain reaction. The first problem is that Supergirl arrived with expectations that were almost impossible to satisfy. This was not marketed as a random standalone superhero movie. It was presented as one of the key chapters in the new DC universe. DC Studios wanted audiences to see it as proof that the reboot was moving forward after Superman. That made the stakes huge. When a studio launches a new cinematic universe, every early movie carries extra pressure. It is not only judged as a movie, it is judged as a signal. Audiences ask, should I invest my time in this new universe? Fans ask, is DC finally stable? Investors ask, can this franchise compete again? Supergirl was supposed to answer those questions with confidence. Instead, its box office numbers created new questions. The movie reportedly earned about $68 million worldwide during its opening weekend, for a movie with a reported production budget near $170 million. That is a troubling start. And remember, movie theaters do not send all ticket money back to the studio. The studio receives only part of the ticket revenue, especially from international markets. That means a movie often needs to earn far more than its production budget just to reach the break-even point. Suddenly, Supergirl was not being discussed as the next big DC win. It was being discussed as a possible major loss. But the numbers alone did not explain why people stayed away. The next issue may be even more important. Audiences were not fully convinced that this movie was essential. Supergirl faced a brutal challenge from the beginning. The character is famous among comic book fans, but she is not Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, or Iron Man. She does not have the same guaranteed mainstream box office pull. That means a movie needed a very clear reason for casual audiences to care. What was the big promise? Was it an emotional space epic, a revenge story, a darker DC adventure, a connection to Superman, a wild action movie featuring Lobo, a character-driven story about Kara-Zor-El's trauma? The answer was a little bit of everything. Supergirl was inspired by the comic series Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, a story known for its darker tone and emotional focus. Kara is not simply a cheerful version of Superman. She is a survivor of Krypton who watched tragedy unfold around her, unlike Clark Kent, who grew up on Earth with loving parents. Kara carries memories of a destroyed world. That is powerful material, but there is a risk when adapting a beloved comic story. Comic readers may expect a faithful adaptation, while general audiences may need a simpler, more accessible entry point. The movie had to serve both groups. It needed to be emotional enough for fans of the comic, exciting enough for superhero audiences, connected enough to the DC universe, but also different enough to justify its existence. That is a very difficult balance, and when a movie's identity becomes difficult to explain in one sentence, marketing becomes difficult too. Superman can be sold instantly. Everyone knows the basic idea. Batman can be sold instantly. Everyone knows the basic idea. But Supergirl needed people to understand why Kara's journey was different. Instead, many casual viewers may have seen the trailers and thought, is this just Superman, but darker? That may sound unfair, but first impressions decide a lot at the box office. If people are unsure whether a movie is necessary, they wait. They wait for reviews. They wait for streaming. They wait for friends to recommend it. And in today's movie market, waiting can destroy a blockbuster's momentum in a single weekend. But the identity problem became worse because Supergirl arrived during a much larger crisis for superhero movies. For years, superhero films were almost automatic events. A new comic book movie would arrive, fans would rush to theaters, social media would explode, and the box office would do the rest. That era is no longer guaranteed. Audiences have become far more selective. They still show up for movies that feel special, fresh, emotional, or huge, but they are no longer willing to watch every superhero project just because it has a cape, a logo, and a post-credit scene. That is the real danger. Superhero fatigue is not necessarily people hating superheroes. It is people becoming tired of movies that feel too familiar. The genre has trained audiences to expect universe building, surprise cameos, sequel setups, alternate timelines, multiverse explanations, and characters introduced mainly because they may become important later. At some point, viewers start asking one simple question: is this movie actually worth seeing right now? Supergirl needed a strong answer. Instead, it entered a marketplace where viewers were already cautious. Other superhero movies in recent years have also struggled when they relied too heavily on franchise connections or characters the casual audiences did not feel attached to. The audience is no longer automatically buying a ticket because a studio says, "This is part of a universe." In fact, that phrase may now make some viewers more cautious. They may wonder whether they need homework before watching. They may wonder whether the movie will end with more setup than payoff. They may wonder whether they are about to spend 2 hours watching an advertisement for another movie coming in 2027. And that is where Supergirl's release strategy becomes extremely important. The film arrived less than a year after Superman helped launch the new DC universe. Instead of feeling like a major new chapter, Supergirl may have felt to some viewers like another early test in a franchise they had not fully committed to yet. That is risky. A cinematic universe needs momentum, but it also needs breathing room. If audiences feel like the studio is asking them to care too quickly, they can pull away. And there is another issue that made this situation more painful. The response to the movie itself was mixed. Critics were not completely united on Supergirl. Reports placed the movie around 49 out of 100 on Metacritic, which suggests a mixed to negative critical response. Audience reaction was warmer, with reports pointing to a stronger audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. That gap matters. It means some viewers enjoyed the movie more than critics did, but it also means the movie did not receive the kind of overwhelming praise that can rescue a weak opening. A superhero movie with great reviews can build momentum. People tell their friends, "You have to see this." Social media becomes free advertising. The second weekend stays strong, but a movie with mixed reviews often has a much harder job. People become hesitant. They say, "Maybe I will wait." And once that happens, the box office can drop sharply. This is especially dangerous for a movie like Supergirl because it needed strong word of mouth. It did not have decades of Batman-level box office power. It needed people to leave the theater excited, emotional, and ready to recommend it. Instead, the conversation became dominated by the budget, the weak opening, and questions about DC's future. That is the nightmare scenario for a studio, because once the story becomes "this movie is flopping," that headline can become bigger than the movie itself. People who might have gone to see it start thinking it must be bad. Even if they would have enjoyed it, they may decide not to spend money on something the internet has already labeled a failure. It is like watching a restaurant become empty because people hear it is empty. Nobody wants to be the first person sitting there, wondering if the chef has already packed his bags. But there is a deeper problem here, and it could affect every upcoming DC project. Supergirl was only the second major movie in James Gunn and Peter Safran's new DC universe. That makes this more than a single movie disappointment. DC Studios is trying to rebuild trust after years of inconsistent movies, canceled plans, competing timelines, and confusing franchise directions. The new DC universe was supposed to offer a clean path forward. Superman was the foundation. Supergirl was meant to show that DC could expand beyond its biggest hero. But if Supergirl loses more than $100 million, it may force Warner Bros. Discovery to rethink how aggressively it expands the universe. That does not mean the DC universe is finished. One movie does not automatically destroy an entire franchise. Studios have survived flops before, but it does mean future projects may face more pressure. Movies centered on lesser-known characters, such as Clayface, could now be judged more carefully. Executives may ask whether audiences want more experimental DC films or whether the studio should focus mainly on its safest names. That could change the entire strategy. James Gunn has built his career by making audiences care about unusual characters. He turned Guardians of the Galaxy into a huge success even though many people did not know the team before the first movie, but the market is different now. In 2014, superhero movies felt exciting because audiences were still discovering how large these universes could become. In 2026, audiences have already seen the biggest crossover events imaginable. They have watched heroes from different franchises collide, timelines break apart, and entire universes reset. The surprise is gone. Now, a movie needs more than connections. It needs a reason to exist. Supergirl may have had the ingredients: a talented lead, a darker character angle, a strong comic book foundation, and a place inside a new universe. But ingredients are not enough. You can have flour, eggs, sugar, and butter, then somehow still make something that tastes like a homework assignment. The execution has to make people care. There is also a major lesson in how Supergirl was positioned next to Superman. The two characters are connected, but they should not feel interchangeable. Superman represents hope, kindness, restraint, and the belief that power should protect people. Supergirl can represent something more complicated. She can be angry, she can be grieving, she can be reckless, she can be powerful without always knowing what to do with that power. That contrast is what makes her interesting. If the movie did not make that difference clear enough to general audiences, then it missed its greatest advantage. Supergirl should not be sold as Superman's cousin. She should be sold as the person who survived Krypton differently. Clark Kent grew up learning how to be human. Kara-Zor grew up remembering what humanity never saw. That is a story with real emotional weight. And perhaps the most frustrating part is that Millie Alcock may not be the reason this movie struggled at all. A new actor can bring fresh energy to a character. The challenge was whether the film around her gave audiences a clear emotional reason to follow. Kara, the box office may be disappointing, but the character still has enormous potential. Supergirl has survived bad movies before. She has been reinvented in comics, television, animation, and now a new cinematic universe. The question is whether DC Studios learns from this quickly enough. So, what is the real truth behind Supergirl's massive flop? It was not one villain. It was not one bad trailer. It was not simply because audiences do not like Supergirl. The movie was hit by several problems at once: a huge reported budget, a soft opening, mixed critical reception, and clear marketing for casual viewers, superhero fatigue, and the heavy pressure of being an early chapter in a brand new DC universe. Supergirl was supposed to prove that DC could expand beyond Superman. Instead, it exposed how difficult that expansion has become. But this story is not over yet. The final financial picture will depend on how the movie performs internationally, how much it earns through digital releases, streaming, television rights, and long-term licensing. Some movies become more valuable after theaters, some gain fans later, some become cult favorites. Still, the early message is impossible to ignore. In 2026, a cape alone is no longer enough. A superhero movie has to feel necessary, and if DC wants Supergirl to truly soar in the future, it must stop treating her as the next piece of the universe and start treating her as a character audiences cannot afford to miss.